stuff.
This morning when I rose.
Hey guys. Back at you, Jen. Hi. We know the truth. Finally, so many people know. Finally. Hi. We're okay. When I say we, I have been had a weird cold and kind of knocked me down a little bit, so it took me a second to get up. So if I sound stuffy still, that's why. But yeah, that's why we're okay. We just needed a second. Yeah, Jesus, please take the wheel in Jesus' name. That's what I have to say about this live. That's how I'm going to pray for it, because I know right now I'm about to probably ask Lord for some forgiveness instead of permission. So I'm just warning you right now. My heart is angry. And I mean angry with all the things that are going on. I know so many of you are already talking about it. They are finished more ways than one. You already told us this. We already know. Yeah. So I don't know what other way to be like, told you so. I got a few things to say, though. So if you don't understand that God is not done with me yet, you might just want to walk away now. Because what I'm about to say and what I might say tomorrow, on Truth Be Told, I don't necessarily know if it's a good idea to put a mic in my hands right now, because my heart is on an anger that I can't even. Yeah. Have you read the files? Baby, I'm in the files. And I've been trying to tell people that for I don't know how long. My entire life. So I want you guys to imagine how irritated you feel. And before I get into this, let me just ask this. If there's any attorneys that are watching this video, please contact us. I'm looking for criminal and civil. We need more than one. So please contact us. Do I believe that the chain of command can do anything? No. This is why the Epstein files exist in the first place. This is why we're in the situation that we're in the first place. Am I banking on anything? No. Will I praise God if there is something? Yes. Will I hold my breath? Nope. No. Okay? Alright? But the problem is that we have, just like we tried to explain it to you with how many times did you contact somebody? How many times did you call a content creator? How many ways did people like, hey, this is going on locally, and I know some evil things were going down anyways. I'm trying to make sense of it. I know it's a lot to fathom. It's a lot to wrap your head around. No shit. It's a lot to go through. It's a lot to go through. So for those of you who have been rocking and rolling, that you remember when we started saying you're going to need, a few months ago, we made a live, go back, and I said, hey, you're going to need your conspiracy theory friend for this next part, because we tried to tell you. Okay? So many other people tried to tell you. How many of you have been called conspiracy theorists? How many of you have been called crazy? It's too dark, it's too much, it's this and it's that. I'm telling you right now, for those of you who are just now watching this video, like, hey, let me see what's going on. Hi, I'm Allie. Yes, hi. Allie Carter. Yes, that's me. My mother, right here, this tall glass of twin of water, is right next to me.
Hello.
And I would turn the camera this way, but you could see her through me. We look just alike. So she's doing something. But do y'all understand? Remember when I just a game? That's the illusion. I understand, like I said, a lot of people, but you know what? Yeah, when the sports fall, do you know how fucked up our men are gonna be? When the sports fall, the men will be paying attention, and then we got a problem. Those men who would do anything to stand in front of the TV and scream the whole damn game. If you feel something, looking through those, if you don't feel anything, you're not human. There's that. You're not human. Either you're not human or you're doing the things.
But Georgia was a fraudulent state that he actually won when he did not.
Yeah, that's what he believes. I mean, he says the things that he believes, and obviously now there's a federal investigation going on.
Is he right or is he wrong?
I don't know. There's an investigation that a federal judge signed off on, so we'll find out.
Scott, you don't know? Scott, you used to know.
Yeah, you used to know.
What are you asking him? Is he right or is he wrong about?
About fraud in Georgia, that
In
whether he
2020.
won or he lost Georgia.
All the evidence we have right now is that Georgia was not fraudulent. However, my point was
Well,
that a
we have
federal judge,
evidence.
a federal judge just signed off on a warrant to go get evidence, and now there's an investigation going on. That was my point.
Well, to Scott's point, really quickly, we do have evidence in Georgia, and I know people don't want me to cite my own reporting, so I will cite the Atlanta Journal-Constitution because it is left wing. We know that during the 2020 recount, 3,000 ballots were scanned twice. The Secretary of State's office could not confirm if those were counted, though election integrity activists say they were counted. We know during the audit of the 2020 presidential election, there were, quote, several cases in which election workers mistyped vote totals or allocated votes to the wrong candidate. The state election board gave a slap on the wrist.
How
We
many
know that
times-
governor.
How
We know
many
that governor
judges
Hold
have
on.
said it was fair?
Brianna, let me just we'll move on from this for a second, but I just want to just
Boy. So it seems as if woke, Trump deranged, Democrat propagandist, CNN host Abby Phillip has met her match. Okay, I mean, she's already met her match with Scott Jennings, but the female version, right, of Scott Jennings, we've seen have found that person on CNN's panel or as a guest. And that is Miss Brianna Lyman, who is a reporter for the Daily Caller. She also works for the Federalist, and she is bringing receipts to these discussions on the CNN panel because we already know that Abby Phillip loves to fake fact check conservatives during these CNN debates, right? That is how she sways the debate because, and let's be real, the liberals aren't prepared, right? The conservatives always dominate for the most part. And when the liberals are losing, Abby Phillip steps in with, again, one of these deceptive fact checks that she loves to do, okay? And like I said, she's met her match, okay? Because Brianna Lyman, she's prepared, right? You can see that she has her papers, right? She has all of her research, she has her facts, she has her receipts ready to go for Abby Phillip. And let's just say Abby Phillip clearly is getting visibly frustrated by the fact that Brianna Lyman continues to drop receipts that destroy her fake fact checks every single time. And this time they were talking about the election out in Georgia, right? The 2020 election that is currently being investigated because we already know there was some funny business. And, you know, the last thing that Democrats want is for the American people to, you know, find out that, there was some funny business that happened out in Georgia. And I just want you guys to watch this exchange, how frustrated Abby Phillips gets with the fact that Brianna Lyman is destroying their narrative live on air with receipts.
votes. What are we to make of all of this?
Well, I think given that under Joe Biden we had millions of illegal aliens come in, it's definitely fair to be worried that there could be non-citizens voting. We know that non-citizen voting does happen, even if it is rare, according to some on the left.
How frequent is it?
Well, if you want to list it, I actually have some for you. Hold
Yeah.
on 1 second.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, like
Alrighty.
actual numbers.
Yeah,
You have
no,
to get to
absolutely.
page 6 or 7
For
to
people,
find them.
I know.
I actually wanted to have a lot of quotes for you guys. All right, here we go. So a Georgia audit found 20 non-citizens registered to vote. 9 of them ended up voting in a previous election.
20?
Yeah,
Nine.
let me finish. In Michigan,
After how many years?
and you know, it's funny when you guys mock small amounts, but let's remember that Marionette Miller Meeks won her 2020 election by 6 votes. Imagine if there were 6
Were they 6
fraudulent votes.
undocumented immigrants?
No,
No,
my
they
point.
weren't.
My point is that some elections are decided quite literally on the margins Texas,
Sure.
and every vote counts.
But not a
let's-
single
let's
presidential
wait,
election
let's
has
just
been decided
that
by
doesn't mean
margin
that
of
doesn't. Wait, can I finish my
non-citizen
point? Can I
voters.
finish my point? That doesn't, just because it doesn't impact a presidential
the-
election does not mean that it is not worthy
What
of
is
attention.
what is the percentage of fraudulent non-citizen voting in America?
I don't have the percentage, but I have more examples if you
percentage
guys
would you
wouldn't cut me
accept?
off. Let me just finish.
I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't know if
Hold
it
on a
exists.
second. Hold on a second. 41 non-citizens cast a
maybe
ballot in North
higher than
Carolina in
1 out of 1
2016.
million.
Okay,
1,500 foreigners registered to vote in California by the state DMV. They were not citizens in 2018.
Oh, did they and
Did
and
vote?
did,
Did
were
they
they
vote?
caught?
Did they vote?
Actually,
Did they vote?
it doesn't
They're
matter
just
if
registered to vote. That doesn't
registering
mean
to
they
vote as a
vote.
non-citizen is legal.
So-
According
I
to
know, but
18
they
U.S.
didn't
Code
vote.
Section 1015 subsection F says that anyone who knowingly makes a false statement when
Hold
registering
on,
to
but
vote
here's the
can
thing.
get jail time.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. I wanted you to go through it because I think it illustrates in and of itself how actually incredibly rare this is. And even when, the Heritage Foundation went looking for non-citizens voting over the course of, 10 years, 10 plus years, they found 77 cases, actually more than 10 years, about 24 years. They found 77 instances of non-voters voting, and they went looking, okay? So, listen, if this were about people, non-citizens voting, maybe that's the case, then please help me explain why Trump is still obsessed with Georgia, where he was looking for 11,000 votes, where Georgia, they've got voter ID, they've got tough voting laws. Why is he saying that Georgia was a fraudulent state, that he actually won when he did?
Yeah, see that you heard that. Okay, hilarious. Abby Phillip asked for the facts. She asked for the data. She got the data, and then she said, "Well, see, it's not a lot, right? As if one illegal voting is not a problem, right? If anybody who is not eligible to vote votes, that's a big deal, right? That's still a vote, right? And that vote dilutes the vote of an American, right? Somebody who's actually eligible to vote. That is a big deal. Nobody's vote should be diluted at all, right? Anybody, even one person who's voting illegally, that's a problem, right? That's a big issue, right? That's not something to poo-poo and say, oh, it's not that many people, it's not that big of an issue.
It is.
Your vote is being disenfranchised, right? Like, again, these people claim that they care about that, right? They care about voting rights, except they don't care about maintaining voting rights when it comes to stopping illegals from being able to vote, which again dilutes the vote of people who, actually are eligible to vote, right? American citizens. It's amazing how that works. But regardless, my point is that Brianna Lyman, she delivered the facts, right? CNN didn't like the facts, so then they try to say, well, the facts aren't a big deal. Again, you see how that works. They're always moving the goalposts. So once again, Abby Phillip is going to try one of her little fact checks, right? And Brianna Lyman is going to bust this one. And clearly, Abby Phillip is going to get frustrated about this one as well, too. Because, again, she's met her match when it comes to these fake fact checks. So without further ado, let's get into this.
The Cato Institute had a study out this week that said
Not the Cato Institute.
that
I just quoted them a little while.
we got another one from them. From 1994 to
They are
2023,
conservative.
the U.S. immigrant population generated more in taxes than they received in benefits from all levels of government. Over that period, immigrants created a cumulative fiscal surplus of $14 trillion in U.S. dollars, including $3.9 trillion in savings on the interest on debt. Without immigrants, the U.S. government's public debt at all levels would be at least 205% of gross domestic product, nearly twice its 2023 levels. The facts are pretty clear. It's not just that. It's clear on education. It's clear on housing. It's laid out there, and yet the Trump administration, rather than addressing what voters want them to address, which is the economy, cost of living, they keep blaming immigrants for everything. Why?
Yeah, before we get to that, I just want to correct the record really quickly. You did say that Governor Kemp and Brad Raffensperger both said the election was fine. I also just want to point out, people, that Governor Kemp did come out with a risk-limiting audit report, which did clarify there were 36 inconsistencies, and Brad Raffensperger also clarified 36 different boxes of
Are we in the
inconsistencies.
same show?
Hold on. I just want to make a point.
But was it? Hold on. But
I
was
wasn't allowed
you're
to
saying, you're
respond.
clarifying? Did they say that there was that the election was fair and there was no fraud in it, or not? Did they?
They're
say that?
saying that there were problems in the
Well,
election.
hold on.
Yes.
Hold on.
Yes, they're saying
Governor
that.
Kemp so Governor Kemp said there were. That is not true. Governor Kemp has
According
said
to his risk limiting auditing, there were 36
What did Governor
inconsistencies in a
Kemp-
November 17th, 2021 letter
Hold
to
on
the
a second.
SEV. These are election inconsistencies found by Joseph Rossi.
hold
They were
on a second.
then tested, and the
Governor
veracity of
Kemp-
his work was independently repeated, and they found out that all of the 36 claims were true. Now, for
Hold on.
Waking
Brianna,
up when
you are
it says
trying
over.
to imply.
It's amazing how when she's dropping receipts, right? When she's destroying Abby Phillip in her silly little fact checks, because that's what she's doing, right? She's dropping receipts because Abby Phillip here, she's trying to basically say there was no problems at all. That the 2020 election in Georgia was 100% legit and there were no issues. And we know for a fact that's not true. And this actual journalist here, right, is bringing the facts to the discussion, and when she brings up the facts, it's hold on, stop reading the facts, please stop reading the facts, right? It's amazing how that works.
That Governor Kemp said that there was
he
fraud
found.
in the
No, I didn't say fraud.
2020 election.
I said
He did
inconsistencies.
not
He
say that.
validated the
He said
election.
it was a
November
free and
17th
fair election.
in
And
over
on top
and
of that,
over.
he also pointed out that there were elections that occurred after Donald Trump lost. And those elections were also free and fair. And not to mention that other Republicans who were on the very same ballot as Donald Trump did better than he did. So whatever I'm not saying there is nothing that is inconsistent about elections.
It was a free
That's why
and
there
fair
are
election.
checks. That's why you go through them and you find them. The fact that they found those inconsistencies is actually proof that the system is working. Okay,
Right. They found out after
so
the
when
election
you
was
argue
conducted, which
that
is
there,
the
when you
problem.
argue that the existence of errors is proof of fraud, that makes no sense, because we
Well, I
should
didn't
go
say
back
fraud, I
then
used the word
and
inconsistencies.
re-audit the Republicans who outperformed Trump on that very same ballot. How do you explain that?
I think. Wait, can I finish
But
my
anyway,
answer before?
let's-
all of
I
this
want to
stuff.
Hold
answer
on.
your question
I
about
do
the
want-
economy. I
yeah,
want to
please
answer.
You know, it's amazing how Abby Phillip asked her to explain something, and then when she goes to explain it, is hold on, stop talking, right? It's almost as if Abby Phillip doesn't want to answer to a question. She doesn't want a rebuttal because she's about to pull the facts. So therefore, let's stop her from answering the question that Abby Phillip claims that she wants an answer to, right? Even though she really doesn't want to answer to it, right? She's trying to make it seem like it's an unanswerable question, but it totally is. And again, they're not letting her answer the question because they're afraid of the facts. Again, this is hilarious. She's met her match.
Because we don't want to derail the
We're not
segment by
derailing
going
it.
back
You
to
just
something
put
that
words in my
was
mouth.
litigated 6 years ago.
Okay, well then I just
6
highly
years
recommend
ago.
that people listen to
Okay.
Ann Brombach, the attorney for Fulton County, who says that yes, she confirms
That
that
we
closing
would
tapes are
like
not
to
signed
still
off.
to the
reading
topic
from-
that we
Yeah,
are
well, if I
talking
was allowed
about
to
right
answer
now.
the first time
Thank
last
you.
segment, I would have answered that question already. Well, you can look up the November 17th, 2021 letter. I can send it to you.
Okay, great.
As for Scott Bessent with immigration, first and foremost, I thought this Cato Institute report was a little sloppy because they did not differentiate between illegal aliens and legal immigrants, which I think
Ding, right? Ding. That's why I don't buy into any of these liberal studies, right? I don't care about what liberal studies say, right? Don't come to me with a liberal study that basically does not differentiate between immigrants and illegal immigrants. And the reason why they do that is because they want to muddy the conversation, because once you start talking about illegal immigrants, it becomes a lot harder to actually measure the public benefits that illegals are receiving, because Democrats and liberals deny that illegals are receiving any public benefits, right? So if you deny that illegals are receiving public benefits, then why would I trust a study from the same people who are denying that illegals are receiving public benefits, even though we know that they do, right? And they do so in roundabout ways. But again, the denial of that, to me, shows that, hey, I don't care about what they say in a study. They don't even accept the possibility that illegals are receiving public benefits. So, I don't really care. We're not talking about immigrants overall, right? That's not the conversation. The conversation is about illegals. She purposely cherry-picked a study that just talks about the impact of immigrants, right, without differentiating between the two.
think is bad for the.
Well, just to be clear,
How
this
is it every time I
well
talk,
because
I get
because
cut
you're
off?
saying something that's not true.
Yes.
The report
The
says that
report
it takes-
the report takes into consideration both
Yes, that's what I
legal
just said.
and illegal, and they say
Yes.
in both cases, immigrants contribute more than they take away from the system. So it does address that very thing that you're saying it doesn't address.
Right. But I'm saying that I think people would also like to see, regardless, just the separate numbers. That being said, I think what a lot of conservatives and MAGA people believe is America is not merely an economic opportunity zone. Even if all immigrants, if we brought in 8 billion people to America tomorrow and they boosted our GDP, we're still not taking into account what happens to culture, society, overpopulation, things like that. And if illegal aliens or legal immigrants, however Cato wants to put these together, is like a cash cow, then you would see plenty of other countries around the world saying, come here, come here, come here, but they're not. So to pretend like illegal aliens, first and foremost, so why isn't any other country taking all of our illegal aliens?
I mean,
They
Canada
don't
is
even,
actually
even their
taking
native
more
countries
immigrants.
don't want them back.
Can I just make one simple point about
I'm
this?
surprised
Can
that we're- hold on.
I just say very quickly?
That's
Let
a
me just
legal
let me just
term.
say we're going to
You're
take
a
a
lawyer,
quick
you
break
should know
and we'll
that.
come back on the other side and I'll let you make your point. Hold your thought.
It's a legal
We'll be
term.
back after a quick break.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Right? Absolutely amazing. It's funny how when you're a conservative and you're coming with the facts, right? You come in with the receipts, they don't let you talk. They don't want you to talk. They don't want you to make your point. But her point is correct in the sense that Abby Phillip cited a study, and this is a study right here. It does not give a detailed standalone analysis on the economic impact of illegal immigrants, right? It does not do that. What it does is that it gives a summary based off inferred analysis, which means a guess, right? They literally are guessing, okay? They're not actually really doing a thorough analysis, right? They're not doing a deeply disaggregated analysis or standalone analysis of illegal versus illegal immigrants and economic impact. That's not what this study does, right? This study, for the most part, lumps all immigrants together and it comes up with, an analysis on economic impact. So what she said was certainly misleading about what the study says, because again, it's not a standalone analysis, right, of illegal versus illegal. Okay, the illegal part of it, the undocumented immigrant part of it, is a guess, right? It's a guess, not based off actual legal status. It's a guess based off labor force participation, wages, taxes paid, and limited eligibility for federal benefits. So basically, they're guessing based off these things that, technically illegals are not eligible for certain federal benefits, so they don't get them, right? But we know that's not the case, right? We know that's not the case. Like, we know that illegals are on Medicaid, that they are receiving Medicaid, they are receiving food stamps in roundabout ways. So you can't trust the accuracy of any of these liberal studies, right? You can't, okay? Ultimately, at the end of the day, they have an incentive to align with the liberal narrative. A vast majority of these researchers are liberal, and this is why you're going to get more of these liberal studies that, again, fit with the liberal agenda. And I don't care if the Cato Institute is technically libertarian. A lot of libertarians are pro-immigration, right? They're pro-illegal and legal immigration, right? There is a larger than you think amount of libertarians in this country who are pro-open borders, right? So I don't want to hear anything about, it's from a libertarian study. Nah, I don't want to hear that. Don't care, right? Don't care. These are the same people who have every incentive in the world to claim that illegals are not on welfare, right? They're not on the system when they are. They are. And furthermore, even if illegal immigrants were a overall net positive, marginally, for the economy, again, a lot of people don't see the country as simply an economic zone where we just should do whatever is best for the economy no matter what, without taking into account culture and the other externalities, negative externalities that comes from mass illegal immigration to the country, right? That's what these liberals don't understand. But as the conservative guest pointed out here, there's a reason why other countries aren't taking in all these illegals, right? It's funny how that works. If immigrants are such a great boost for America, why does that only apply here? Why doesn't that apply anywhere else, right? Why doesn't it apply when we send them back to Mexico, right? We send a lot of these illegals back to Mexico, we should be helping Mexico out, right? That should be a boost to Mexico. But apparently that's terrible, that's bad. And you have other countries like Canada, for example, they've decided that they're going to cap their immigration numbers. They're saying, hey, you know what? We've let too many people into the country. Well,
what it do?
I see
I'm going to have to be down in a city council meeting in spirit, since or city hall meetings in spirit, since I'm banned for 60 days. So just know that I'm
live stream.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm gonna start coming in. You remind me. Yes, because since I'm not allowed, and we're banned for until after the midterms.
After the midterms. yes. So did you hold on? The 243 million that was misspent. Misspent. That's great. I love how they use the word misspent.
Yeah, misspent. I wish I can tell the IRS that.
All right, that you misspent.
Or my property taxes. When it's time to go pay those high property taxes, I wish I can tell them that somehow I misspent my property taxes. Instead of paying this property taxes, I paid this high light bill that you all, the Frisker, implemented. Maybe I could, I wish I could say that. And they say, oh, okay, well, that's okay. We understand.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right, y'all. We're going to start. People are going to be coming in. But yes, we want to talk about this lawsuit that was against Cook County on March 6, 2018. A group of construction and road building companies led by the Illinois Road and Transportation Builders Association, IRTBA, sued Cook County. The reason why they sued was they said that Cook County was breaking the law. Of course, that's all they do is break
all day.
The law, called the Safe Roads Amendment, says that money collected for roads and bridges can only be used to fix roads
and bridges.
Bridges. Not too crazy.
Too crazy.
Not too crazy. Instead, Cook County was spending that money on other things like paying the sheriff, the courts, and other parts of the government.
Courts, and when we say courts, I can imagine these judges. The courts. How they do. Pay them a little something in their pockets and look the other way. Yeah.
Right. All these illegal evictions. That is going through the sheriff's department. Right. Stuff like that. That's where the money. That's where the money was going to. Legal evictions.
Yes.
Because they need to bring that money back. The money. When they steal the home or the property or whatever they're trying to steal, take that money, and gamble with it and see, how much they can make back because they done stole $243 million. Where the money came from. So a lot of people, I want to break down, where the money came from. So the tax money came from the gasoline and diesel taxes, new car taxes, wheel tax on vehicles, parking taxes, other transportation related taxes. What the lawsuit said was Cook County should not have taken this money. The money was supposed to fix roads, bridges, and public transportation, not pay for other government things. 2018, the lawsuit started. Cook County tried to get it thrown out, but the case continued. Good judge. In 2022, the Illinois Supreme Court said, yes, the Safe Roads Amendment applies to Cook County and sent the case back to a lower court. So they couldn't pay that judge off. Couldn't pay that judge off. Okay. Good judge. So And then January 28th, 2026, a judge said Cook County violated the law by spending $243 million on things that were not roads or bridges. Of course. So imagine getting you some money in a piggy bank to buy school supplies, and someone spends it on candy instead. That's basically what Cook County did with taxpayer money. And the court said they were wrong and must follow the rules. Now, also it's a RICO. We gotta talk about the corruption. We gotta talk about the corruption because see, the corruption is the issue, right? And nobody doesn't want to talk about this corruption. You didn't misspend $243 million. You stole 243 million, like you're stealing the tax increment financing money and the property taxes, and saying that it's going to the schools and pushing for the schools and all these things, but
you don't go. And the thing about it is, because you don't have oversight, I can say I spent it on, like you said, I spent it on candy and I spent it on supplies. That's not, but who is it, who's there to make sure you did even spent that money on that? And where that money went? Because there's no oversight. So I can say anything. So $243 million comes up missing or not going to where it's supposed to go to, and no oversight to say where it actually went, because you cannot say who's there to say, okay, well, yeah, the police or whatever you said, police and the judges or whoever it is you said you gave it to, where's that breakdown, where's that list at, where's that at? You know, like you said, with the tip money, they give the tip money to these developers or these companies, and then no oversight, and then these buildings or whatever they gave the tip money for never get built, and it's just, oh, oopsie. I mean, you don't hear nothing else from it.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It's crazy, and then when you bring it up or talk about it, they violate your First Amendment for bringing up it, and you should bring it up because your tax dollar is part of this. Right. But they don't want you to bring it up, but they will talk about stuff that doesn't make any sense, like Alex Antifa Pretty and Renee No Good. Today I saw a little video. This guy named Lee Merritt, Murray Merritt, whatever they want to call him. Well, you want to say his last name is. He made this AI video of like all of like Breonna Taylor, Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, Michael, the guy that was here, Laquan McDonald, a whole bunch of things. I don't know if Tamir Rice was in there, and then it went to Renee No Good and Alex Antifa Pretty. That's how hard they're trying to push this narrative, because they done stole so much money to divert the killings, right? So even if you say that there's so many police killings, right? Like so many police killings, all the money that's supposed to divert the police killings, right? And make sure that, police are trained, that the citizens are trained, that they know how to approach law enforcement. Law enforcement knows how to engage better with citizens, stuff like that. All that money is stolen, right? So, because they have to keep this division, right? Keep this division. So that's what they're fighting for. They want to keep the racist division right now. It's not even racist division. It's really law enforcement are the KKK. Law enforcement are the problem, are the issue, and we need to overthrow law enforcement. We need to overthrow law enforcement, even though drugs are over here, drug trafficking, human trafficking, children trafficking. We have so many rape crimes. We have so many now new car accident crimes. All these crimes, migrant crimes, were being pushed out. with these people, these new arrivals, these illegals, these migrants, whatever appropriate word feels good for you, illegal aliens, because that's what they are, and that's a legal term. And if we're going to talk about legal terms, that's what we have to deal with. So the legal terms and all that, all this money is being spent. Our taxpaying dollars are being spent to bring in a whole group of new people because y'all are losing the vote. Y'all literally are losing the vote because y'all are weird.
Because you have no policies that
and you have
America
no policy, but y'all are weird too. The vote got weird. They got weird.
Oh yeah, they very and satanic. And
satanic,
satanic is they work for Satan, and they have no policies that the average common sense, everyday, law-abiding citizen, American citizen will vote for. Or you don't even have to be a law-abiding citizen. Just a person that, you know, because you got men who understand, we talk to, who have been locked up, who still may not be, you know what I'm saying, on the righteous road, but they understand this don't make no sense. So
not at all.
It's nothing. You have no, and you know you don't have any policies that the Americans want to vote for, but you care because if you steal elections and if you import your voters, then it don't matter no way. You see what I'm saying? You don't have to.
Right.
You just have to steal elections like they're just doing right now, arguing about voters ID. They still don't want to implement voters ID, but we have to have voters ID to go to the liquor store. Somehow it's racist because black people can't sing. We're not smart enough. We're just that dumb that we don't know how to go get our ID. That's the argument right there. So, but black people not offended with that.
No,
because that's very offensive to me.
Super offensive.
I'm not smart enough to go get an ID, but yet I couldn't even you wouldn't even let me close to DNC when you all were here. You had to have an ID there. You had to have an ID. You got to go to, mandatory now. You got to face recognition to go, if I want to go fly out anywhere. So you're forcing me to, against because I didn't ask you to take a picture of my face. That I didn't condone that, but I had to do that. But yet, and show an ID, but to vote, it's racist. Well, then I can say that when I go to the liquor store, when I go to anything, that's racist for you to ask for my ID. It should be. That's the argument here, right?
Yeah. I mean, all of
coming. They carried out almost 700 boxes filled with ballots, filled with election materials, filled with things that Fulton County was required to keep. Of course, making press, Tulsi Gabbard was there, Director of National Intelligence, not traditionally a law enforcement role, and Democrats are throwing a fit. Election officials out in front of the county buildings, calling this a travesty, calling this an abuse of power, and saying, vote for me because this is really bad. But the reality is a federal judge signed this warrant, finding probable cause. Kash Patel went on live television saying the same thing. And the reality is this is democracy working in real time. What went into that warrant? What is Tulsi Gabbard looking for? What is the FBI investigating? What is going to happen to those officials in Fulton County with respect to election fraud? What's the conspiracy going on? I'm going to get into all of that on this episode of Off Air. By the end of this, you are going to have a full and complete understanding of what went down in Fulton County, what the allegations are likely to be, and what the Director of National Intelligence is doing in this whole picture. Let's start with the pre-dawn haze of January 29th, 2026. Federal agents descended upon Fulton County's election warehouse in Union City, Georgia. They executed a federal warrant, a federal search warrant, and FBI teams hauled away over 700 boxes. Reportedly, those boxes contained ballots, tablature tapes, voter rolls, and other records from the very epicenter of Georgia's election conspiracy. Most think that this haul is going to shine light on exactly what Donald Trump was talking about during that call. We need to find the votes. Most believe it's going to find or uproot a large conspiracy operating in Fulton County. Well, we're going to get into all of that right now. As we dissect this raid, who, what, when, where, why, it's clear that Fulton County, Georgia, the beating heart of Atlanta, a Democratic stronghold, remains ground zero for suspected voter fraud. And I'm going to get into exactly why on this episode of Off Air. As many of you recall, Fulton County was ground zero for the 2020 election, being one of those states that voted for Joe Biden despite having many Republicans in office. And as we'll get into a bit later, 10% increase in voter turnout during COVID-19, a time when most people were staying indoors. We'll get into exactly why that happened in a bit. Biden just won by 11,779 votes. And as many of you recall, the 2020 election happened during the heart of COVID-19. COVID-19, a time when different jurisdictions were trying to figure out how to deal with electing the president at a time of a national pandemic and a national emergency. Democrat states decided to mail ballots to every single person on their voter roll, whether or not their address was updated, whether or not they'd kept their information correct. The result here in Georgia and many other states was that ballots were going to homes and being returned to sender. Ballots were going to homes and sitting. Ballots were going to homes despite the fact that the individuals who reside there did not request a ballot or may have received a ballot in a different name. That sets up a lot of problems. In a normal election, you or I have to specifically request a mail-in ballot. That's how it goes. Many of you might have done that before. And when I was in the military, I did that all the time. The ballot's mailed to you. You fill it out. You send it back in. You've cast your vote for your person. But many states, including Fulton County, despite the warnings by Republicans that this would be fraught with fraudulent activity, decided to simply mail ballots to every single person who'd registered to vote. Now, mind you, entities like Acorn and others had been going around the country for years, decades at this point, getting people to register to vote, busing them to places to register them to vote. People were being paid to hound other people to register to vote. And vote registries started to swell with people who really had no intention of voting. Why was that? What was up with the push for voter registration? Obviously, if you're a citizen and you want to vote and you know how to vote, you're going to register on your own. You don't need anybody to push you to do that, just like getting your own health insurance. Well, the reason behind this is obviously not just to get good, upstanding people to vote. It's to increase the number of mail-in ballots that can be sent out to these individuals. And when those ballots aren't returned, what happens to them has now become part of a federal election. Georgia decided to implement one of these everyone gets a ballot approaches, and as a result of COVID-19 executive orders by governors, they bypassed traditional safeguards that normally would have kept mail-in ballots by request only. Reports claim that ballots went to inaccurate addresses, enabling ghost voters. A 2021 NPR report noted plans to rescan 142 Fulton mail-in ballots due to serious chain of custody questions. That's an NPR report, ladies and gentlemen, not Fox News. Right-wing commentators allege that organized groups had been going around the country collecting these stray ballots and filed them for Biden on election days. Now, some of those claims, according to liberals, they've been discredited, but the reality is a search warrant has been filed at this point in time, leading a lot of those claims to become potentially a bit more credible. In December 2025, Fulton County admitted to verifying 315,000 votes without poll workers present, a violation of both state and federal law. You got that right, ladies and gentlemen. Fulton County admitting to federal and state legal violations because they verified 315,000 votes. Remember, the difference between Trump and Biden was only 11,000 votes. That is a massive mistake and a massive error, and that alone is enough to get you a search warrant. But it gets worse. A 2020 affidavit from a Fulton County observer claimed thousands of ballots looked identical, possibly from ballot printing software, and this is something that was cited in many Trump lawsuits. The argument here is that these could have only been created by a computer, and because mail-in ballots are supposed to be hand-filled in, anything that is bearing a perfect circle is going to be very problematic and potentially a fraudulent ballot. Some say Dominion voting machines might have been the cause of these circles. Others discount that and say that Dominion voting machines can't actually fill in ballots. That's been the subject of many lawsuits, including a large Fox News settlement and currently litigation ongoing against a few members of Trump's cabinet. Now, official audits from Fulton County claim that there were no issues. They've been counted and recounted. But in the face of this affidavit, citing perfect ballots and 315,000 votes being counted without proper observers, you can't really say that those prior verifications are official enough to resolve the story. The reality is the numbers are incredibly fishy here. Fulton County saw a 73% turnout in 2020. That was up from about 57% in 2016. Now that's statistically impossible to have happened. People don't just show out in numbers. Now, they say that might have been because of close races, that might be because of increased excitement in the election, but those things tend to actually go both ways. When you have a close race, people on both sides tend to turn out. Very rarely do you see almost all of that turnout go for one individual. The statewide voter turnout was indeed historic at 66.7%. Now that's statewide in Georgia. 66.7% statewide in Georgia, 73% turnout in Fulton County alone. You look at those figures together and you see that Fulton County, an urban county, was able to get much more voter turnout than even rural areas in Georgia. That's statistically even more impossible because the reality is, and the numbers just speak for this, urban populations tend to have lower voter turnout than rural populations, especially during these types of elections. Now, some say that this was driven by mail-in voting, COVID-19, high-stakes Senate runoffs, but that's not enough to explain such a massive urban voter turnout. This represented about 4.9 million votes cast in Georgia, the highest in the state's history. Now, we've got, dare I say it, an unprecedented pandemic. People are scared. People are remaining in their homes. The decision was made to mail ballots to every single person. A large number of those came back, so large that it amounted to the largest voting total in state history. Despite that fact, every lawsuit, every question raised by the Trump administration was met with, that is false, that is illegal, and that is conduct that can be indicted. That's what Donald Trump was met with. Now, the reality is, you should all be asking questions about what happened in Fulton County. COVID-19, and you get the largest turnout in state history. It's quite shocking. I want to talk to you a little bit about Benford's Law violations. This is, if you're a statistician or if you know anything about statistics, is how we measure whether or not something is potentially fraudulent when it comes to statistics. Now, I won't go into the entire law, but I will say that this is one way that we evaluate numbers and the distribution of those numbers to see if one data set compared to another data set might be inaccurate or fraudulent. Consider it kind of this smell test that we would give of voter turnout. Now, many people, when they do this Benford's Law analysis on Georgia voter turnout, it turns out that that's kind of impossible to have this sort of voter turnout miraculously and randomly. And that's just based off of the data alone and the typical deviations that you would see in the data. That doesn't even factor in the fact that COVID-19 was occurring at that time. An ACM study in 2022 found no significant fraud using clustering algorithms, but skeptics argue that that discounted the use of mail-in data. High voter turnout could be legitimate from COVID, but the reality is that a turnout so high that it was the highest in the state's history is incredibly fishy and requires some form of investigation. Now, here's what voter fraud would likely look like if it was being conducted in Fulton County. And this is likely what you're seeing from this search warrant and this investigation being conducted right now. And I'm basically picking this up from an analysis of much of the voter data that I've already looked at, a view of some of the statements that are being made by people like Representative Trey Gowdy, Representative Loudermilk, some of Tulsi Gabbard's prior statements. but also some of the information collected from the lawsuits that we've seen on the ground and the defense of Donald Trump's criminal case. So here's how it would go if Fulton County decided to fraudulently tip the scales of the election for Joe Biden. First, you create a mail-in ballot exception to the normal rules. Normally you request a mail-in ballot. In this case, what you do is you make sure you get mail-in ballots in the hands of everybody, regardless of whether or not they verified their driver's license, their address, their citizenship, whatever. And that's exactly what Georgia did. Ballots were mailed to every single person based on what they'd previously registered with. In fact, there's allegations that ballots even went to people who did not register to vote. The next thing that happens is harvesters go around and collect those votes and fill them out. There might be people going around assisting people with filling out their vote. There might be people getting the ballots saying, we will take care of this for you. There may even be people just going around collecting ballots that were not delivered in the mail and grabbing them and collecting them as harvesters. We already know there's a lot of nonprofit groups roaming around the country engaged in no good. Look at my last episode about the Minneapolis riots and who's paying for those riots, and you'll see non-governmental organizations, NGOs, can get people to do just about anything. The next thing you do is you fill these ballots out and you insert them in unsecured drop boxes. Now, we've already seen some 2020 videos showing these late night drops in certain counties, large amounts of ballots at the last minute being dropped. And because these ballots are being dropped at the last minute, they oftentimes don't face very much scrutiny. Then the machines that tabulate the ballots have software glitches or unsigned tapes associated with them. And because of that, those ballots will likely be hand counted. So some of the counts for Donald Trump disappear and other counts for Joe Biden and others appear. Now, I'm not saying there's hard and fast evidence of this. I'm saying that if you were going to tip the scales of an election, that's exactly what you would have to do. And that's likely what Tulsi Gabbard is looking into. Remember, it's only an investigation, but this is what she's looking into. So now, let's go full circle. Why raid the Fulton County election offices? Why try to get a hold of 700 boxes? Well, they're supposed to keep all of these records, and apparently the warrants on them indicated that there were potential federal law violations related to record keeping. In civil lawsuits, the DOJ had requested these records. Fulton County declined. They tried to get an order, in fact, did get an order from a civil judge preventing the turning over of those records in furtherance of a legitimate investigation. This led the Department of Justice to move forward with a criminal search warrant related to obstruction of justice and the failure to keep records pursuant to an election governed by federal law. That was enough probable cause, the information that I've already shared, to get that warrant of Fulton County records. So, chain of custody docs, machine logs to analyze them for tampering, specific ballots for forensic analysis, handwriting samples, ink tests to determine whether or not some of these votes were filled out by machine, or the types of things that Tulsi Gabbard and the FBI are likely to engage in. Now, we don't have any smoking guns yet, of course. This is just an investigation. But the reality is that there was enough to convince a federal judge to sign a federal warrant authorizing somewhat of an unprecedented search of an election office. So on January 29th, 2026, that raid occurred and the FBI seized boxes, tablatures, ballots. Now, Tulsi Gabbard was present. And as I indicated earlier, that sparked a lot of concern for people. In fact, it seems as if most people are arguing that Tulsi Gabbard's presence there is somewhat nefarious. Now, for those who don't know, Tulsi Gabbard is the Director of National Intelligence. Typically, this role is focused on bringing intelligence together, making sure that Americans aren't spied on from an intelligence standpoint, but also making sure that the intelligence agencies coordinate with each other to get their job done. This is somewhat of a post-September 11th type issue where we see the intelligence agencies working together through the use of the Director of National Intelligence, because they are able to make sure that certain intelligence doesn't get pigeonholed. What's she doing there? What is more of an international position doing boots on the ground at an FBI search warrant? Well, Tulsi Gabbard's been the DNI since 2025. She declassified documents related to the Russiagate hoax and the Steele dossier. She's been very vocal on many press conferences, publicly calling out former President Barack Obama, indicating that he manufactured Russian election interference through the use of the Steele dossier. She alleged, in fact, a treasonous conspiracy, as she called it, perpetuated by the Obama administration. Now, election issues that happened in 2020 would be barred by the statute of limitations in 2026 because that statute of limitations is only 5 years. If you wanted to charge somebody in 2026 for conduct that occurred in 2020, it would be a violation of the statute of limitations. But here's where Tulsi Gabbard comes in. And this is where a bit of my inference comes into play. In order to get around the statute of limitations, you have to argue something called a conspiracy, or argue that there was racketeering occurring. Now, if Tulsi Gabbard is currently investigating Barack Obama, Russiagate, Hillary Clinton, and the use of her private email server, it's very possible that she's also investigating 2020 election interference because they lost in 2016 and wanted to regain in 2020. Tulsi Gabbard's appearance at that search warrant is probably one of the most important facts that I have seen connecting these two investigations. It tells me that the Hillary Clinton Steele dossier investigation that also involves Barack Obama, Loretta Lynch, and other high-profile figures, including James Comey, is connected to the 2020 election fraud conspiracy investigation. Why is this huge? This is huge because if there was communication between people in Fulton County as a potential epicenter for where this might occur, and that communication was either known by the Obama administration or the Biden administration or others that were involved, possibly even Jack Smith himself, they knew about this and potentially covered it up, that would be a separate violation of federal criminal statutes. Meaning that those individuals may have been involved in a cover-up related to election interference by, get this people, indicting somebody for election interference. It goes full circle. If they knew that there was nefarious ballot activity and instead of letting people know about that, decided to cover it up by actually charging Donald Trump for his activities, that would be a separate conspiracy chargeable by our federal statutes. Now, there's one more thing that I really want to address before we end this episode of Off Air. Immediately after this search warrant happened, a lot of people came forward. A lot of Democrats in Fulton County came forward, and they said that this is a battleground. They said, you must vote for us because this is about the midterm. It's very clear that instead of responding to the conduct, all they're doing is continuing to call people crazy and saying you're out of your mind if you're challenging this election. They say it happened in 2020. We've had elections since then that were completely fine. All of their rhetoric completely avoids the issue. One thing that we should not bury, listeners of Off Air, are the statistics. You can ask yourself some pretty easy questions and realize that nobody's really answering them in order for you to understand the need for an investigation like this for the American public. First thing is, why was voter turnout so high during COVID-19? Why have state legislators found admissions of 315,000 votes being counted without the proper observation? Why are there videos of ballot boxes being stuffed? Why did the legislature in Georgia, for the first time in history, decide to mail out hundreds of thousands of ballots, millions of ballots, to people that didn't even request them in the first place? Honestly, if you don't have good answers to those questions and you think that an investigation here is wrong, you are absolutely out of your mind crazy. Something very obviously wrong has gone on here, and the only thing we as the American people want, without censorship, without name calling, is for Tulsi Gabbard and the FBI to finally get to the bottom of it. What happened in Georgia? Now, I'll tell you a bit of a personal story as we end this episode. And it's very personal to me because I was quite shocked when it occurred. I was in Detroit during that election, 2020. Obviously, COVID was going on, and I lived inside the city. I'm not a mail-in ballot kind of guy, and if COVID's going on, I'm going to get out of my house, lace up my shoes, I'm going to jog down to the voting place, and I'm going to cast my own ballot. The reason I do this is because if I'm able-bodied, I should be out there voting with real people, and I somewhat like the experience as a Marine veteran, as a citizen, as a bit of a patriot myself. But I also wanted to see what was going on in Detroit and what people were acting like. Well, when I got there, I realized that there was almost nobody there. I chatted up one of the ladies there who was taking ballots, and she said it was the slowest turnout in history. I watched the news that day, and I realized that everybody else was reporting it was the slowest turnout in history. But then I flip on the news a little later, and I realized that over there at the Huntington Place Center, they've boarded up the walls, they've kicked out observers, and they're counting a bunch of secret ballots that nobody's allowed to talk about. When there was litigation around it and somebody got a hold of one of the machines, a court found them in contempt, and there's been a whole bunch of pandemonium. I'm going to do a whole separate story on what happened in Detroit, so make sure that you click like and subscribe on this one. Hit the bell notification so you get that story on Detroit.